becoming who He's called us to be. Hey, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Gracefully Evolving with Lee, where faith meets real life, and we're learning to trust God through every season because God is still writing the story. Hey, friends, it feels so good to be back behind this mic. There is something humbling about realizing you can know better and still find yourself accepting something you swore you had outgrown. I thought I had healed this part of myself. I really, really did. And then life showed me an area where I was still abandoning my own boundaries. And maybe that's the part of healing nobody really talks about. So this episode is called Standards versus Boundaries. Sometimes you just don't know whether you've healed something until life puts you in another situation where you have to practice what you've learned. I haven't been behind this microphone because I've been living through something that I challenged whether I actually practiced the things I thought I've learned. I had to sit with myself because how can I have such high standards intellectually but make exceptions emotionally? How can I know exactly what I require from people, communicate it clearly, recognize when somebody isn't meeting it, and still allow them to have access to me? And that's when I realized standards and boundaries aren't the same thing. A standard says what I require, a boundary says what I will do when that requirement isn't respected. And baby, those are two very different things. Because I can say I require consistency, accountability, respect, communication. I require somebody who takes responsibility for themselves. Those are standards. But what happens when somebody consistently gives me the opposite? Do they still have access to me? Do I keep explaining? Do I keep accommodating? Do I keep fixing? Do I keep giving another chance after chance? Do I keep carrying the responsibilities that were never mine? Because if somebody repeatedly gives me the opposite of what I say I require, they will receive the same access to me. And at some point, that isn't a requirement anymore, it's a preference. And that realization hit me. I don't think my problem was ever that my standards were too low. If anything, I've always been able to tell you exactly what I expect. But this season taught me that having high standards doesn't actually automatically mean you have strong boundaries. Because standards without consequences can become suggestions. You can tell somebody what you won't tolerate all day long, but what happens after they do it? That's when the boundary comes in place. And recently, I had to ask myself something so uncomfortable. Was my boundary actually based on what I would tolerate or on how badly the other person needed me? Because apparently, somewhere along the way, need became an exception. And that's dangerous for somebody with a big heart. Because when you are compassionate, when you're a helper, when you're somebody who naturally tries to figure things out, you can start confusing someone's need for you with your responsibility for them. Those two are not the same thing. Someone needing help does not automatically make them responsible for providing it. Someone struggling does not automatically mean I have to be their solution. And someone's circumstance does not automatically require me to sacrifice my peace. But here's what really got me. I realized I had enforced the same boundary with somebody else. Same me, same heart, same standards, same ability to say no. And with one person, it was a straight up nope. Boundary done. But with another person, well, maybe I can help this one time. Let me give it a little more time. I don't want to put them in a bad situation. They really don't have anybody else. Let me just figure this out. Wait, If I could enforce the boundary over here, why couldn't I enforce it over there? That meant my problem wasn't I didn't know how to say no. I knew how to say no. So I had to investigate what made one person's circumstance powerful enough to make me override myself. And that right there, I think that's where some of us have really got to be honest. Who are you willing to disappoint? Who makes you feel guilty for choosing yourself? Who can you tell no without losing sleep? And whose disappointment makes you immediately start negotiating with a boundary you were sure about 5 minutes ago? Because sometimes the difference isn't a boundary, it's the emotional responsibility we've attached to the person. Why do we feel guilty for closing a door somebody else became comfortable walking through? I'm going to say that again. Why do we feel guilty closing a door somebody else became comfortable walking through? That's a question I have been sitting with. Because sometimes people become comfortable with access that was costing you something the entire time. They were comfortable, but you weren't at peace. They were benefiting, but you were exhausted. And because you kept making it work, they have never had to experience the full weight of what belonged to them. Then the moment you finally say, I can't do this anymore, guilt shows up. Because now you're thinking, what are they going to do? How are they going to fix this? How are they going to figure this out? But guess what? I had to ask myself, why have their outcome become my responsibility? That's the part. Because sometimes we aren't afraid of enforcing the boundary. We're afraid of what happens to the other person after we enforce it. And because we don't want them to struggle, we volunteer ourselves to struggle instead. I'm going to say that again. And because we don't want them to struggle, we volunteer ourselves instead. And eventually, helping someone can quietly turn into abandoning yourself. I've learned that I can love people, I can help people, I can pray for people, I can want the absolute best for somebody and still have boundaries. Those things are not opposites. But when helping someone requires me to repeatedly sacrifice my peace, my time, my resources, my emotional capacity, or responsibilities that actually belong to me, I have to ask myself whether I'm still helping them or whether I've started abandoning myself. And that's difficult when you truly and genuinely care about somebody because saying enough can feel cruel when you're used to being the person who figures it out. But boundaries aren't punishment. I'm not enforcing a boundary because I want you to suffer. We don't enforce boundaries because we finally understand that your life cannot continuously require the sacrifice of mine. We can care about what happens to you without assuming responsibility for what happens to you. I can pray for you without rescuing you. I can want better for you without building a better for you. I can love you without carrying you. Maybe my standards weren't actually the problem, y'all. Maybe my boundaries didn't have consequences because I knew what I wanted. I knew what I deserved. I knew what I expected. But knowing something and protecting it are two completely different things. And this season showed me I don't need higher standards. I need to become more consistent about protecting the ones I already have. Because having high standards doesn't automatically mean I have strong boundaries. My standards tell people what I expect. My boundaries teach me what I'm willing to do when those expectations are not met. And maybe that's the evolution happening in me right now. I'm not learning how to stop loving people. I'm learning how to stop believing love requires rescuing them. I'm not becoming cold. I'm becoming consistent. I'm not losing compassion. I'm learning that compassion needs boundaries too. And maybe healing isn't reaching a point where you never repeat an old pattern. Sometimes healing is recognizing the pattern faster, asking yourself harder questions, and making a different decision once you see it. So if you're listening to this and you've been frustrated with yourself because you thought, I should have known better. Maybe you did know better. Maybe knowing wasn't the lesson this time. Maybe, just maybe, enforcing what you know was. So here's what I want us to sit with. What standard have you communicated that your actions have accidentally made optional? Where are you saying, I don't tolerate this, while continually trying to tolerate it? Who gets an exception to boundaries you enforce with somebody else? And what are you afraid will happen to them if you stop rescuing them? But that last question might tell you more about your boundaries than anything else. As for me, I'm learning something I'm carrying with me the rest of this year. What is it mine to carry? I won't. That is my theme. Not because I don't care, not because I don't love, not because I don't have compassion, but because I'm finally understanding that I can love somebody deeply and still let them carry the weight of their own life. And maybe that's the boundary I needed all along. So until next time, keep trusting, keep growing, keep giving yourself grace while you gracefully evolve. This is Gracefully Evolving with Lee, and I'll talk to y'all in the next episode. Bye, friends.